thank you all for participating. And those who are in the circle and everybody else, we all play a role together. Everybody has a role to play in this community, right? Let alone our country. In this movement, we all have a role to play. And every little thing matters, okay? Together, people came and contributed a simple beat. But together, we already created something really amazing. Together, okay? So don't think that, oh, I'm doing this little thing here, maybe it won't have an impact. But just know that the incremental small steps that we take each and every single day, combined together, is super powerful, okay? So everybody has a role to play, everybody has a voice, and today we're here to honor and listen to Black voices, okay? So thank you for participating, thank you for being here, and onward, on we go. Right.
Sahara's on the live stream right now.
Must be my second viewer.
Oh yeah. Too coffee. I can't see. It's like when on Facebook Live you can't hold your phone sideways. What if you like fed the charger through that little hole or something? Is that the problem? I feel like we could figure it out. We could take a sec right now. Greta.
1 second. Oh yeah.
What if you put the charger through that hole if you need to have it in or something?
I think I'm gonna.
What battery is your phone at?
Will be Chuba, a current Brookline resident.
Hey everyone, thank you for being out here. Let's give a round of applause. What's your name? Let's give a round of applause for Jonathan. For leading that Jonathan. So I wrote a poem. I wanted to talk about, this whole thing is about humanizing Black voices. And I felt moved to talk about Black culture, what Black culture means to me, what I think it really means to this country. When I think of Black culture, I think of freedom culture. Freedom culture is what you and I are doing right now by being out here today. So I wrote a little poem. I live in a city crowded with lights, so bright they block the stars at night. And from my windows I cannot see the dainty clusters of the galaxy. Ponder as I may, I watch and wait, ever restless from early to late. I wait, hoping that heaven might break through the dark black canopy where stars can escape. But behold, celestial skies elude this city of mine. There's not enough darkness for these stars to shine. I could silence the cars that hog the highways and recapture hidden stars that seem to migrate. I could cut off the power, turn off the switch, and forever change this starless city, now starlit. I could veil the streets, hide the towers of concrete. Maybe then would the stars be clear to me. But try as I may, angels escape my eyes, and I cannot make out the stars that hide in my sky. What will reveal these stubborn mysteries? Is God yet jealous of worldly bigotries? Do I ignore the dark that lingers within me? How can I scorn the dark but seek to know light? Have I become so blind building the city of mine? I've built my life upon Edison's invention and have failed to give the dark an honorable mention. But when the flame expires and the circuits cease, my blackness will make everything clear to me. When darkness overcomes and mystery unfolds, we will look back and discover the scandal of this world. But we must first learn to die. In death we learn to see what a world made white is not yet willing to be. Have you ever had a dream that was so powerful? Oh, thank you. Have you ever had a dream that was so powerful and so meaningful that you felt an intense desire to make that dream a reality, no matter how seemingly unreachable? Have you set your feelings and hopes upon it, praying that it would come into existence? Personally, I've discovered that dreams are central to what enriches life. Hold fast to dreams, writes Langston Hughes, or life is a barren field. Black history is a story of a dream. It is a story of tragedy and heroic resistance. No other group in America has had such a long tradition of viewing American society from the bottom. In every phase of American history, we see countless examples of Black people turning the plantation, the prison yard, the urban ghetto into a platform for self-expression. As William McKee notes, quote, African-American religion, the spirituals, the blues, and the gospel songs have flowed like a river of pathos across the centuries, carrying stories of injustice, survival, hope, renewal, and liberation. And in all its different manifestations, Black culture has been a powerful and urgent voice for social justice, being voiced in a number of different mediums, including novels, poetry, drama, and scholarship. Black culture first manifested itself as a form of praxis. Turn to your neighbor and say praxis.
Praxis.
That's right. Manifested itself as a form of praxis. That is to say, it was foundationally shaped both aesthetically and socially by its attempt to combat systematic oppression. When faced with centuries of oppression and trauma, Black people maintained a space in which they remained free to create their own folklore, religious customs, oral traditions, and musical practices. For them, culture became the very means by which they could reimagine their world and prevail over the barriers imposed upon them. Now, from our vantage point as commercial consumers, it might be difficult to understand all the many ways in which Black culture has uplifted the lives of the oppressed. Yet Black culture thrives on this legacy, calling to mind the wailing of Louis Armstrong's horn in Black and Blue. In sum, Black culture is far more than a profit commodity. It is the experiential lens through which we have experienced our world. It describes a certain orientation we feel towards life that has enabled generations before us to survive the horrors of racism. In Black culture, we see centuries of struggle with a historical plight that can never be replicated. So we must learn to uncouple ourselves from the hegemonic logic that privileges whiteness. We cannot allow ourselves to believe that by concealing color, we are somehow providing for racial harmony. A colorless culture will only become a more stultified culture, one in which only the most conventional and most profitable will dominate. As people living in a racist world, we must do more than just accept what is only acceptable to others. We must learn to embrace what is truly acceptable within ourselves. Only when both blacks and whites demand freedom for themselves and others in society will we finally know whether this generation can live up to its destiny. And for that, we have only to look back upon the example set by our ancestors, whose longing for freedom and demand for justice remains an eternal beacon of promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuba, for those words. Our second act is Chinwe, current Brookline resident and father of Obi.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to say a few words about myself, and of course also raise the average age of this gathering a little bit. I am an immigrant. I came to New York in 1980. I was a teenager. I came from Nigeria. For those of you who don't know, that's one of those countries that he who shall not be named has called a shithole country. I came here as a student, get a college education, and try to make something of myself. And to a large extent, I think I've succeeded. I have MD and PhD degrees from one of the most prestigious institutions in the United States. I further trained and was a faculty member at arguably its best medical school. I currently work as an executive at a premier multinational healthcare company. So for many reasons, I have really lived the American dream, and I'm very grateful. But still, I am sad, I'm pained, and I'm hurt. And people would ask, why would that be for somebody who's done whatever it is they came to do in this country? Until I came to the United States, I had never personally experienced racism on the basis of skin color or any discrimination of such. But it didn't take long. Initially I was just oblivious. I didn't know what I meant. And then it didn't take long before I caught on. And then it didn't take long before it became a really continuous painful experience. Over the years, hundreds of encounters of racism, piling up one on top of each other, sometimes briefly forgotten, but always recalled at the next instant, just like a wound that doesn't really heal. That's been the story of my life for almost the 40 years that I've lived here. One of my most memorable experiences of blatant racism actually happened during a medical school admission interview. I had lived in New York for 3 years. I didn't have much money, and I had gotten invited to go for medical school interviews at 5 institutions in the southern part and midwestern parts of this country. I took a bus. It was my outing in America. Great way to go see America. And my interview had all been going really well until one day, Saturday morning, I was interviewing at one of the schools. I was one of around 70 applicants that day. I was the only black person, but that was not a problem. I was to interview with a panel of 5 white faculty members. That itself was also not a problem. The problem was actually the interview itself. The lead interviewer started by saying to me, "We don't get many people with a difficult name as yours. Could you tell us something shorter we can call you?" I paused and I said, "Well, my name is Chinwike. It's 9 letters long. That's not really terribly long. It's got lots of vowels and it's quite phonetic. And I'd interviewed at least another 10 places in the eastern coast of this country, and nobody had ever asked me to give them a different name than my given name. But I was there to audition for a place in the medical school class. So I decided I would just break the ice. So I said, you can call me Mr. C or anything that starts with the letter C. And I smiled at them, hoping for a good effect. What I got instead was, from the lead interviewer, that is a really stupid thing to say. What if I called you a cat, a caterpillar, a chin, a catfish? And he reeled off a series of words all starting with the letter C. And of course, the rest of the interview was pretty much a blur. But not so blurry for me to forget that, of course, one of the questions was, why didn't you just train in Nigeria among your own people? And then there was a long diatribe about the catastrophic consequences of the brain drain from the African continent, of which yours truly was now the main reason for it. So it's been almost 40 years that I've been here, and that makes me mad because I have hundreds of stories like this. But I want you to imagine what it must feel like for our sisters and brothers whose families have been here, generation after generation, having to deal with this idiocy for 4 centuries. That really makes me mad. Yep. I'm also mad at myself for how I have dealt with racism. At the places that I have trained and I have worked, there are usually very few black folks. It's actually not unusual for me to be the only one. So I don't speak about race at work because it makes my colleagues and friends uncomfortable. I don't speak about race because I will be accused of playing that race card. So I have made a colossal mistake, and I just say no more. I will unabashedly speak up if ever this comes up for me in the future, going forward. I have 2 teenage children who are going to, the last one will be joining here in this high school. I want the America that's ahead of them to be very less discriminating than it has been for. I want the America that's ahead of them to be one where a casual traffic stop doesn't lead to fatal accident. Over the last few weeks, because of this movement, I have received a lot of calls. I am a black friend to a lot of white folks. They call, and they're all well-meaning. And they always ask how I'm doing, how my family is doing, what they as non-black people can do. And I say basically the same thing. Don't be a bystander. Act, speak up, contribute. And if you're in a position to offer an opportunity to a person of color, do it. We've got a long way to go, and there's much we have to do. I am so thrilled with this movement, going across the country, driven by mostly young people like you. But there's much to be done. I want to take my last minute and just say, please vote. If you cannot vote, or you're not old enough to vote, please help others vote. Get out to vote. Register people to vote. Tell your parents to donate to causes that will get people out. I look across at what's happening and I feel like if the balance of power remains the way it is right now, we are just looking down the road to more chaos. We cannot let racism fester indefinitely. The stupidity that's associated with it does need to go and go permanently. So the time is now, and I thank you.
Our third speaker is Lexi Donesco, Rising Brookline Senior.
Hi. So recently I've been noticing that as we inch further away from the murder of George Floyd, that people are starting to get tired of this. They're getting tired of seeing these Instagram reposts and tired of hearing Black Lives Matter, tired of all the protests and the vigils. I'm tired too.
Is it dying?
I'm tired that we still need to have this conversation in 2020. We can't even agree that Black Lives Matter. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm tired of watching innocent people of color get shot down just for trying to breathe. I'm tired of being afraid for my family and my friends. I'm tired of people telling me that because my dad is white, that I'm not allowed to be upset. I'm tired of not being allowed to feel the pain of my uncle getting arrested for riding a bike. I'm tired of your silence. I'm tired of seeing my mom cry. I'm tired of people thinking that posting a black picture on Instagram is going to make a change. This isn't a trend. This isn't something that just stops once your Snap story disappears. I am truly so sorry that you are tired. Your Instagram is blowing up with real stories that make you feel uncomfortable. I have a poem that I want to read, and I've read it at BHS before, so if you're a student there, you've probably heard it. I want to say before I read it, though, that I will never fully experience what it's like to be fully black. I will never try to speak from that point of view. But if I'm given the opportunity to share my story and to share my experiences of being treated differently because I'm mixed, I will never let anybody take that away from me.
Yes!
So, to the people who called my hairs a bee's nest, to the people who called me Oreo, to the people who to the people who make me question myself every single day, to the people who try to invalidate what I've experienced, to the people who insisted that I was adopted and that my mother is my babysitter, to the people who told me I couldn't have a voice because I'm only half black, this poem is for you. When you ask me what I am, do you know that I have a million answers? That there is an entire universe inside this flesh. I am alien to you, but don't you see? I'm the galaxy. I'm full of stars and nebulas. You can admire my beauty and how exotic I look, but you can't even seem to appreciate the complexity of my universe. You ask me to choose races as if it were a choice, as if, like my galaxy couldn't hold the sun and the moon, like my sun wasn't the slave, like my moon wasn't the master, like I don't feel the guilt and the privilege that comes with who I am. I don't know why my skin doesn't match my mama's, but I promise you she is not my babysitter. I promise you that daddy is half of me too. It's cool that you think that my existence is so fascinating, but my existence was illegal not long ago. So what am I? I'm trying to make you understand the gravity of my situation and trying to make myself understand who I am. So what are you? I am a supernova. Thank you.
Is Josue Anselm, Rising Brookline Jr.
Hello. Cool. Warning: there is some language that pretty offensive, but it's part of my story, so I gotta say it. So be prepared. It was my first day of first grade. I was terrified. We literally just moved from Rhode Island. I didn't know the town. I didn't know anybody. My father and I were walking to my classroom, and I noticed nobody looked like us. My dad and I stood out. The parents and the kids are just staring at us. I remember feeling uncomfortable, telling my father, I want to go home. We get to my class, I meet my teacher and enter the classroom. I examine and see kids sitting in the circle. Again, I noticed none of the kids were black, like me. I sat down at the circle, and instantly, these two kids moved away from me. At 6 years old, I understood I'm treated differently because of the color of my skin. Second grade, a white boy called me and my little brother a nigger. We both looked at each other, lost. We thought he was speaking another language or saying something random. I went to ask my babysitter, Michael, at the time, what it meant. When I said the word, he froze. He asked, where did I hear that word from? I told him about the white boy that said it to us. He got up and told me to point out the boy. He was with his babysitter talking. We approached them, and Michael explained to the babysitter why we were walking to them, why we were talking to them, and told her about what the boy said to my brother and I. She asked the boy if it was true. He said no. She looks at us and tells us we're lying. Michael and I just walk away. He explains the history of the word and how the boy is a horrible person for saying it because it was used to show how he was better than us. 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, I was the only black kid in my classroom. In 6th grade, I was one of the 2 black kids in my classroom. That same year, a white boy called me a slave. I punched him, and I got in trouble, and I was spoken to. I was forced to apologize, and I did, but the kid never apologized to me. In 7th grade, I was one of 3 black kids in my main room. The N-word was passed around like food. White boys would come up to me and say, "What up, my nigga?" I remember people telling me they wanted to be black so bad, just so they can say nigga, so they can rap like us, sing like us, so they can be stylish like us, so they can be like us. At first I took it as a compliment. However, I soon started to take it personally. I didn't view it as a compliment anymore. They're forgetting the fact for 246 years, my ancestors were getting taken from their own country, their home country, sold to people as property, and forced to labor for free. They're forgetting that for 99 years, there was laws that were enforced, racial segregation in southern United States. They're forgetting the 86 years of lynching. They're forgetting the 14 years of civil rights movement, where my people were fighting to end racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans. They were forgetting police brutality that lasts today, until this day. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rashad Brooks, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Isaiah Lewis, Michael Brown, Alton Sterling, Tatiana Jefferson, Philando Stalin, Freddie Gray, Dontre Hamilton, and many more victims of police brutality and modern-day lynching. Being black in Brookline isn't any different from being black in America. I want to make that clear. I still feel and still treated as an outsider of this town. 15 years old was the first time I was stopped by police with my friends. Supposedly, 4 black boys walking home on a winter night from basketball practice is suspicious. 16 years old, I was stopped by police. They asked me to open my bag to see if there was weed in it. When I told my father what happened that night, when I was just seconds away from going home from work, he told me to put on a coat, we're going. We went to the police department, and he talked the whole entire time. He was saying, what y'all did to my son, I want the man right now. I want you to find him. I didn't say anything, because no BS, I was embarrassed. I was like, damn, again? My dad really just yelling at these guys again? What did I think of it? Simple. But when I realized why he was doing this, he didn't want me to end up like Tamir Rice. He didn't want me to end up like Trayvon Martin, because now I'm his age. Any kid my age can die just from police. You can be unarmed, you can be even armed. We'll still die. When I walk these streets of Brookline, it's crazy. Like, I'll be waking up at 5 a.m., ready to go play basketball, tap in gym. I can be walking the streets, I see a lady coming up, I can see a man coming up, they cross the street on purpose. At first I didn't understand. I was like, what the hell's happening? Like, I'm just walking to school, getting ready to play ball, practicing before school. And then I realized why. I like black, so I wear a black hoodie. Black sweatpants, white shoes, dirty, backpack, hands in his pockets. He's walking towards you. So what do you guys think? You crossing the street? Or you can keep walking up to me? Okay. When I'm older, I want to be a neurosurgeon. When I say that, my dad's friends, they're like, oh, that's interesting. What do you plan to do to get there? I'm like, what do you mean? Like any other person. Work hard, get good grades, go to college, graduate, at school. Continue on, that's how you become a doctor. So what's the problem? Oh, it's hard. Yeah, I know it's hard. So I'm willing to work for that. Because every day I have to put 2 times the work than any other person in my classroom, right? Like, black women have to do 3 times the work so they can actually be seen. So when people always ask me that question, why you want to be a neurosurgeon, or like, do you know what it is? Do you know what to do to get there? I always get tight because I'm just like, what the hell, bro? Like, if I was a white boy and I said that shit, what would you think? You'd be like, well, that's great. You just gotta work hard. But really, do you have to work hard? Because your parents got the money, obviously, if they live in Brookline. So, like, I don't understand. Yeah, school's hard, but you have the money. I have to work for my scholarships. I already knew that since I was a little kid. My dad told me that. He's the same person that told me what to do at age 8, what to do when a police officer stops you. So when I wrote that essay, I didn't know what to talk about. I didn't know if I was gonna shout out, if I was just gonna cuss out Brookline for what they did. I don't want to do that, totally. I just want to say, the reason why I'm here is because I want my story to be heard. Like any little black boy that wants their story to be heard. Because right now, they're not in this stage, like, they're not here like me. They're probably in their homes, scared that if they leave that house, the second they leave that house, there's a good chance they'll get stopped by a cop. If anything, it might go completely wrong. They might not come home to their parents. And I feel the same exact way. Even though Brookline's safe, I don't know. I'm 17 now. Maybe at age 17 I'll make a stop while driving in the car. Tell me I accidentally don't put my hands up. Boom, I'm dead. So now my father has to come home with a dead son. He didn't even graduate yet. Think about that. Little black boys have not come home because they were shot by police. So every time I think about Brookline, I think, what do the people think of me? Do they think of me as a hardworking child trying to work his way to be a neurosurgeon? Or they think of me as what I likes to eat watermelon, likes to eat fried chicken, that only plays basketball, doesn't know how to read. He needs help every single time with his homework. And he just sells drugs on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Josue. Our 5th speaker of the afternoon is Odessa Elmore, Brookline class of 2017.
pushed myself away from my peers of color. I always felt that I wasn't black enough for my peers and classmates of color, and that I was too black for my white acquaintances. However, more and more, I found myself drawn to white crowds. My white neighborhood and town is no excuse for my absence from my black community and identity. Growing up in Brookline, I recognized my privilege as a biracial woman, but I still fear. I fear because the people closest to me don't understand. I fear because sometimes I don't even understand. I fear judgment. Judgment that I will never truly fit into neither white nor black communities. I feel lost. I was never taught black history and solely learned about the white America that we live in today. I couldn't bring myself to share both the white and black sides of my identity until my sophomore year of high school. I grew up in a life of privilege as my highly educated white mother and black father gave both my brother and me the opportunities that many black kids in the surrounding neighborhoods didn't have. My sophomore year of high school was when I recognized and identified more with the black side of my identity. I began writing, but I still felt like my white peers and teachers didn't understand. I was usually the only student of color in my classes and continue to be to this day. When topics of race arise in my classes, I can feel people's eyes staring at me, expecting me to speak on behalf of all black students. While there were resources and people to talk to, I was always too nervous to make use of them. I realized the vulnerability that I would face in my life as a biracial woman, but still felt disconnected from other black students and people in my town. I often questioned where I fit in. This is when I had to take a step back and recognize certain aspects of my life. As a biracial woman, when I look in the mirror, I physically see a tan white girl. I know I'm white passing, and because of this, I have privileges that my black peers and other biracial people don't have. For years, I laughed along when classmates and peers joked about my race. I've been told that I'm the whitest black girl and that I'm too white to be black. I hid behind the jokes of 100 lashes for Augusta. I silenced my own voice when I needed the most. My race is not the punchline of your joke. My race is something that you learn from. Over the past couple of weeks, I've seen movies, watched TED Talks, and listened to speeches. One line from a James Baldwin speech stood out to me as he talks about loving and accepting ourselves. He says that when white people learn to love themselves, quote, the Negro problem will no longer exist. Until you accept and love yourself, myself and the black community will never be fully accepted and loved. I find myself finding the flaws in the organizations that I'm part of. Why can I count the people of color in my sorority on one hand? Why am I surrounded by white people with every job that I hold? I sometimes contemplate how my life would be different if I weren't part of them, or if I left the organizations, but I remind myself that I can be the reason for change. Change not only happens when we talk to those closest to us, but when we create discomfort between ourselves and the institutions that we're part of, between us and the organizations that we're part of, between us and people living next door to us. American Indian, Asian, Black or African American, Pacific Islander, white. There was never a 2 or more races, biracial, or multiracial box to check until I was already in college. My whole life I struggled with having to choose between letting one side of my identity go in order to get a job or apply to college. Upon entering college, I found myself contemplating which clothes to wear and how to wear my hair each day. I haven't worn my hair natural since I was a child because I've always hated my hair. My white-centered world made me yearn for stick-straight hair, but this isn't me. Which aspects of how I dress would represent my white side and which would represent my black side of my identity? It wasn't until about a year ago that I realized that these were things that only I cared about. I've lived the majority of my life stuck in my white identity, but my time is far overdue to challenge my white peers to accept the black side of my identity. To my white allies, do not be silent. You are not part of the problem when you're silent, but you are the problem. Even though the social media posts may have stopped, that should not have been the only thing you were doing to help the black community in the first place. Our fight, the black community's fight, is not over. It's not nearly over. We fight a constant fight each day that we walk this earth. Don't let us give up on you. Show your black peers that you care. Help promote and make a change in this world. Think about the one thing that you can do today and build on that each day forward. While I can't change my identity, I'm proud to call myself a biracial woman. I leave you with a poem I wrote about 2 years ago. I'm from the cold winters of New England, from my grandparents in South Carolina. from the smell of fried chicken and mashed potatoes sizzling on the stove. I'm from the small, quiet, white neighborhood where I'm the little black girl who stood out in class. From the small upper lip my white mother gave me and the black lips my father gave. I'm from the try not to stick out and get good grades. From my nana and pop migrating to New York for jobs. I'm from the buy me this and buy me that, the only worlds I grew up knowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Odessa. Our next speaker is Kazi, current rising Brookline senior.
Hey everyone. I remember my first day of kindergarten in Brookline. I didn't know it, but I could feel that this place was different. Every day since then, I've had to travel from Roxbury to Brookline. Even though they're only 20 minutes apart, it's as if they're two separate worlds. At school, I was with white kids. At home, I was with black and brown kids like me. Unconsciously, I code switched between the two very different neighborhoods of my life. At school, I had a lot of white friends. Naturally, being around them made me act and talk like them. Then at home, I had friends from my neighborhood and family, and I didn't need to act around them. I could just be myself. One day, one of my white friends said to me that I'm the whitest black person he has ever met. I was so confused. Did they think I was white or black? Was it because I was light-skinned they questioned my race? With only a handful of black kids in my grade, I couldn't help but stand out in the crowd. Around the beginning of my freshman year, I started to think about my Latinx identity. I knew I wasn't just black. My mom is Puerto Rican and my dad is Honduran. It was difficult to accept myself as something a majority of people wouldn't notice at first. However, I would know at the end of the day, society will see me as a young black man first. My dad has played a big part in teaching me what it's like to be a black man in America. I've also had many black men in my friends and family who have warned me of the challenges and given me the wisdom to survive. One piece of knowledge in particular is how to act around police. Even though I've been going to school in the safe town of Brookline, I've always had to keep my eyes open and to watch my back. Now here's a quote from one of my favorite American novelists, poet, and activist, which shares a part of what it's like to be a black person in America. To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. James Baldwin. This is true for me. This is true for a lot of black people. We are angry, but most of the time, we're not allowed to show our anger, because then we'd be seen as a threat, as an enemy. Now in times like these, I get to use my anger to vocalize these social issues. I'm here today because for me, racial justice isn't a hobby or an interest. For me, it's survival. Survival for my friends, survival for my family, and survival for all black and brown people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kazi. I now invite Josue back up to the stage to speak on behalf of Malcolm Cawthorn, who could not be here today.
Malcolm Cawthorn is a dear friend of my dad's. My dad used to work here actually, so they knew each other at that time. Malcolm Cawthorn was my freshman tutorial teacher. He actually was like a kind of like a father figure to me when I was at the high school. So he taught me a lot and all that. He's actually he's the head of the MECO program, if y'all know. So congratulations to him. I was actually very happy when I heard the news. Again, there is offensive language, so be prepared. Friends and colleagues sometimes sarcastically call me the mayor of Brookline. I am a townie who has grown up, taught, coached, and had mentors, coaches, and camp counselors that still work for the town of Brookline and are closely connected to Brookline. I almost always bump into someone I know when I walk around Coolidge Corner, get coffee at Cafe Noble, buy a slice at Pino's, or pick up something at CVS. It's true that I have a wealth of connections to Brookline, and that I made a conscious choice to work and live in Brookline. I do love this town. My existence within this quite improbable, it is with sadness and frustration and irony when someone refers to me as the mayor. My family moved to 321 Tappan Street in 1973. This was the result of activism. My parents, who won lawsuits against 2 different realty companies for racial discrimination before finding a realtor that would help them find a place and raise their 2 sons and a daughter on the way. Little black kids that took prideful pictures with the shikis and afros now lived in the town. We played with white kids, bi and multiracial kids, Asian kids, adopted kids, and very few black kids. We stood out. However, like most kids, we didn't care as long as we could play. When I was 6, I was called a nigger by a pair of white kids sitting behind me on a school bus. They were actually trying to describe the difference between myself and them. I remember the pain on my father's face as he had to explain to me what the word meant, its history, and its present usage in 1976. I continued to go through the school as one of the 5 black kids in my grade. This usually meant I was lucky if another black kid was in my class's K-12. K through 12, my fault. I only had 2 black teachers in Brookline Public Schools, both women, both my first year at Brookline High School. I observed how to play football was rooted. How playing football was rooted with racial overtones, despite it being the most racially diverse sport that I played. At the time, the basketball team was a majority black with a black varsity coach, and I was the only black kid on varsity baseball team for 3 straight seasons. All of this made me want to leave Brookline, and I did. I went to a historically black college in Louisiana, where I knew I wouldn't see any people from Brookline. It was incredibly formative and informative for my understanding of blackness in America. I fell in love with my wife in teaching. We moved to the Midwest, started a new family, had a good life. Our children grew up to school age, and we didn't like our options for their education, nor their options for their future. We decided to move to Brookline. I had seen the power of Brookline's education as a college, a graduate student, and a teacher. And in 1998, with the perspective of a parent, the choice was not easy, and my existence here has not been simple. By the winter of 1998, I had been stopped by Brookline police to see where I was going while walking to get our car from our overnight parking lot. By 2000, my daughter and I was referred for special education testing by her white student teacher. Wow. By 2002, I was the first black football coach in history of Brookline High School and Bay State Conference. By 2004, my youngest daughter was referred to for special education by her white teacher with less than 1 year of teaching experience. By 2008, I had to confront the liberal SWS teacher in my content area that his casual use of the word nigger in his class was inappropriate despite the white kids and the Democratic vote that let him think it was okay. In 2010, my oldest daughter graduated from BHS earning a full tuition academic scholarship. In 2012, when the 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was murdered, I had a flashback of my youthful memories of Yusuf Hawkins, Mamadou Diallo, I hope I said that correctly, Rodney King, and Tawana Brawley. 2014, my youngest daughter graduated from BHS and earned multiple academic scholarships for women majoring in STEM areas. In 2015, a student in a group presentation for chemistry had the word nigger on one of the slides. That would be in my he would be in my US history class that fall. In 2017, a video using nigger 8 times in 20 seconds surfaced on social media. A student in that video was in my US history class when the video was made. It was in the same year that I emceed a flag raising ceremony in honor of 3 black slaves who had fought at Lexington Green and was recognized as Teacher of the Year at BHS and for the Roger Grant Social Justice Award. In 2020, I've watched a pandemic do disproportionate harm to black and brown people. Black and brown people have lost their jobs at a greater rates than any other groups. And the murder of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Rashard Brooks, and too many others. All at the while, I had to explain on multiple occasions to BHS teachers, counselors, and administrators why MECO students and families are having a hard time. These facts, these events are to help people understand my adoration, respect, and disdain for Brookline occurs simultaneously. For me, my blackness is unapologetic and unprotected. It is a source of pride and a source of sorrow, and I can't separate the emotions. So I ask you, Brookline, if I can love you through all of this, will you always love me when I point out my existence here? Will you believe me? Or will you tell me I should be happy to be known as the mayor? Thank you.
Thank you, Jose, for relaying Malcolm's message so fluidly. I now invite Lydia Richardson, current rising Brookline senior, to speak.
Hi. First, I'm going to talk about my experiences of injustices, and I'm going to talk about my dad's afterwards. Multiple times when I was in school, I was called a gorilla, even bullied with it. And tons of people don't seem to think that's racist, but it really is. Surprisingly enough, it was taught in school at some points and depicted in many pictures, yet people still don't realize. I've also had encounters when walking on the street. People would either speed up, stare, or cross the street. And this was before Corona was a thing. This used to make me upset, but then I embraced it by saying something along the lines of, I've got the plague, my bad, I didn't realize. Or I just acted a tad bit crazy, not too crazy to get called upon. Because there was nothing wrong with me, of course. I was just black, you know. People didn't ask me that, I guess. This brings me to my dad now. He is the only black cop in Natick for 33 years now. But don't worry, he's a good one. As he was growing up, he went to Belmont Hill. Upon arrival, when he got into his dorm, he found across the wall someone had sprayed in all black the N-word, a hard ER. Then, as he was a correction officer, someone put sugar in his gas tank. And finally, when he was in training to be a cop across the back of a building in Natick, he found Hill, the N-word cop. Again, with a hard ER. But through all that, he still has succeeded in his position and has won plenty of awards, such as Officer of the Year. Through all these instances, we did get our justice. We both didn't let racism define us during these injustices. We still continue to carry on. That was the main point I was trying to bring across within my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Now I invite John Manday, current Brookline resident, to speak.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Who's tired? It's okay. How about a little chant? Black lives?
Matter.
Black lives?
Matter.
Awesome. I just want to share a little story. It might be a little bit long. I'm going to try to keep it short. There's a little bit of historical content here based on where I come from. So my name is John Mande. I grew up down the street and I went to Brookline High School. But I moved here about 21 years ago from Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Congo was colonized by Belgium in 1885. A team of explorers led by Henry Morton Stanley were sent into Congo by King Leopold II, a Belgian royal who funded the conquest. Stanley's arrival in Congo marked the start of a colonial reign of terror that would forever transform the colony. Congo was the personal property of King Leopold. Their purpose was to explore and exploit the land for the benefit of the king. In the early years, they mainly exported slaves and ivory. Then they discovered that the colony had an abundance of natural rubber of the best quality. The discovery of rubber in Congo put the people of Congo on a path of no return. John Boyd Dunlop invented, he was a Scottish veterinarian. He invented the first commercial inflatable rubber tire in 1888. The world's demand of rubber just took off, and by 1901, Congo was producing 6,600 tons of rubber for the global market. Harvesting the raw material was a arduous task that required many people in hard labor. Human lives were not of importance to the colonizers, so they killed whole groups of people and cut off the right hand of anyone who didn't meet the nearly impossible quota they'd imposed. Executions were a daily occurrence. The colonizers, when they came, they split up families. They split up people in regions, and they created borders. People who were normally and naturally interacting and engaging with each other, now all of a sudden, couldn't really freely move around. Essentially, the idea of tribes, there weren't really tribes. There was the kingdom of Congo was there, and obviously people lived in separate areas, but they all intermingled. But the idea of tribes or tribal war, you hear a lot, was introduced by colonizers, specifically in this case with Congo, definitely. So it makes me wonder a lot. Just a little caveat here, I'm going on a tangent, but it just makes me wonder a lot when I hear on TV, oh, tribal warfare. And that's kind of one of the ways they kind of use to paint these people, these non-developed people of Africa. But it makes me wonder, why don't you say the same thing about white supremacy? Why don't you look at it as a tribe? Right? Because when you identify so deeply with your tribe and you're willing to do anything and die for it, why couldn't we call what's happening in America with white supremacy as tribal warfare? In addition to the biological wealth, archaeologists discovered deposits of gold, copper, diamonds, zinc, cobalt, tin, wolfram, manganese, tantalum, and just a whole host of deposits, geological deposits of just wealth in Congo. During the last century and a half, whenever acute problems in the world has arisen on the international market for raw material, be it ivory in the Victorian era or rubber after the invention of the inflatable tire, copper during the full-out industrial military expansion, uranium during the Cold War, alternative electrical energy during the oil crisis of the 1970s, coltan in the age of portable phones, cobalt for electric cars today. Congo has turned out to meet the world's demand. As a rule, from the onset, not a drop of the incredible profits trickled down to the larger part of the population. Friends, I'm here to remind you that without stealing from places like Congo, without stealing from some of the quote-unquote shithole countries, without bringing slaves to this country, the West wouldn't be where it is without black people. It just would not. Because they used our labor, they raped and abused black women, they have stolen our inventions for profit, and none of that has trickled down to black communities, black people in general, especially here in this country. And so, what are we gonna do about that? You know, Black Wall Street was an incredible place where black people came together to live in a community. They worked very hard, right? Pull yourself up by the bootstrap and created a community. They had doctors, lawyers, wealthy people, but colonizers didn't want that because it was something that was going to challenge the status quo. So what are they going to do? Destroy it. They literally bombed a whole community of people here in America, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. So the colonizer and his mentality, not only has he stolen, raped, and taken everything for his own benefit, but continues to keep his knee on black people's necks without any regard for their own growth and development. So for a very long time, black people have been split up. Families were split up, and we were taught to hate each other. Black Americans have a perspective of Africa as, you know, just monkeys. It's not their fault, because that's what they were taught, you know? And so for a very long time, black people in America had a negative view of Africans. And also Africans would come to America and say, I'm not like them. They're bad. They're the criminals, right? And that's also not their fault, because that's what they were taught, because it's part of the strategy to separate people. But when we come together, black people have created wonders in the world, built pyramids, created number systems. So I'm all for investing in not just my culture, not just Africa, because that's where I come from, but I call for black people in this country, I call for everybody sitting here to get to know the histories of colonization, but specifically to black people in the audience. Get to know your culture, because it's been taken away from you. There's been a lot that's been built in the last several hundred years here in America, but get to know where do your ancestors come from. Get to know your culture. Invest. Go to Africa. I just told you all the things that's there. I mean, there's all these things on the ground. I mean, there's wealth everywhere. Go. Invest. Invest in Africa. And if you want to know how to do that, if you want to know how to invest in Africa, come talk to me. It is completely possible. I want to leave a world where my children and their children have an easier way, because they don't have to worry about getting killed. They don't have to worry too much about, you know, inferiority complex and being around people where people don't look like them, and it makes them feel like they're not good enough just because of the color of their skin. We've got to go out and compete. We've got to rebuild, build businesses, build large towers. Let's rebuild Black Wall Street. What is that going to look like? right? So these things are entirely possible, and it can happen through the right investments. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Our last speaker of the night will be Princess Pilot.
I really shouldn't be up here. I'm 54 years old and this same old nonsense is still going on. That means that my generation...
Louder, please.
That means that I shouldn't really be here. I'm 54 years old and that means my generation has failed. Okay? I take ownership for that. What I do want to applaud are all the speakers who came in here today. With each one of their individual... Because each one of their individual stories is really important. But I want to piggyback on my man from the Congo here, okay? Think about what he talked about, colonization, imperialism. You see, does any of that ring a bell with what's going on right now? I hear lots of people say, well, I never owned slaves. I never lynched a black person. I never called someone a nigger. But guess what? You're a beneficiary of that 400-year history. You need to own that. That's for sure. So all these people here are talking about, you know, I heard one person say that when they were 8 years old, their father and mother had to teach them about the police. Is that correct? What to do with the police. Well, the civil rights movement of the 60s, does anyone know where that really began? I mean, there was like this one major thing that happened that set black folks off. It was the murder of Emmett Till. And what set them off was the fact that Emmett Till's mother had the strength to have an open casket to show the world what these people had done to him. I gotta take a moment just repeating that, because 65 years later, we're doing the same old shit. Now, define insanity. That's okay. So, we there? So define insanity. You do the same old thing over and over again and you expect a different result. Well, let's see. We've had 45 presidents, and all but a handful of those presidents were either Democrats or Republicans. Insanity. We regurgitate the same old people to get elected to these positions. We're talking about education here, is what we're really talking about. You know, I just recently started, after a number of years being educated in this country and elsewhere, realizing that I was never taught the real history. I had no idea that there was a 10,000-mile wall around the kingdom of Mali, which is known as Timbuktu. Is that correct? 10,000-mile wall. But you hear about the Great Wall of China, not taking anything away from the Chinese. But when you look at the revisionist history, what we're talking about is, first of all, you brought Africans over here to become slaves. If you teach a slave that their history is richer than yours, then how can you make them a slave? Doesn't make sense, because they'll have self-worth. If you think about this, the race of black folks in this country are the only race that I know of on this planet that don't know the country they come from, the language they had, what their culture was in general, because it was whipped and beaten out of them for profit, imperialization. We went on a trip to London a few years back, and our kids were much younger at the time, and we went to the Tower of London. Is that where they keep those funky diamonds? Okay. And so they have this tool, oh, this is beautiful and that's beautiful, and I'm looking at these things and I'm saying, where did they come from? And how did they get them? I know people love England, you know, the sun never set on the Union Jack. Well, do you know why it never set on the Union Jack? Because they did some dastardly things in third world countries. which is actually first world because minorities are the largest population on this planet. Okay, so anyway, back to where we are now. We need to change this. Protesting, I think, is fantastic. But after Emmett Till was killed, they started this thing called the Montgomery Bus Boycott, and it lasted for about 382 days. And in that time, check my figures. Whatever I say up here, don't just take it as rote. Study it. But I believe that that cost the Montgomery Bus Company about $3,000 per day. So in today's dollars, that would be about 29, somewhere in the high $20,000. And remember, at the time in 1955, you could buy a brand new car for $1,500. So they cost them $3 grand a day. My point is, I'm not going to keep talking because what we all have to do is we have to re-educate ourselves. We have to understand that the richness of black culture and black history it's something that you have, unless you really have dug deeply into it, it way predates the Abrahamic God. Okay, way predates that. I'm talking by tens of thousands of years. So that's number one. Number two, yes, please protest. Go out and tell people you're sick and tired of this bullshit. Like Malcolm X said, I'm not going to ask you for my human rights. I'm going to take it if you won't give it to me. Now, that means things might get a little bit violent. But guess what? We've had 400 years of violence perpetrated on us as a race of people. Now, if this happened to other races of people, I'm sorry. There'd be police and guns and military and how dare you, but no, not the black folk. You know, just kneel on Floyd's neck while he's calling his mother's name. What the fuck? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? If we don't do better, what's that old Jewish saying? They came for them, I didn't say anything. Blah, 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 until they came for me and there was no one left to holler out for them. We have a hell of a lot of work to do, people. And we need to start getting real about it. Because all this other bullshit out here, it's not working, okay? Like I said, the Democrats and Republicans have had the White House and the Congress for hundreds of years. And we still have this imperialism going on out here. There's a lot more I wanted to say, but that's the gist of it. So I thank you for listening to my...
Got some good speakers. Bro, I love that man. He's fucking awesome.
All right, guys, so that concludes our speakers for the night, but I'd like to invite everyone who did speak to come up to this stage. We're going to conclude with a little candle lighting, so if you're in the crowd, please come up. All right, perfect. We light each of these candles in remembrance of the beautiful black bodies that have so wrongly been taken from this world, from their homes, from their families, from their safety and protection. And now for a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Just a few last words before we disperse. Thank you so much to all of our respected speakers for being so vulnerable and sharing your stories. Can we please get a round of applause? So I intend to run a series through Humanize Black Voices, and so if you're interested in participating in our next event, please stick by and reach out to either me or Petra, my right-hand woman, right there. Yes, round of applause. And the question I hope you all take away from today is, how can I take the next step? As beautiful as this was, think of what we can accomplish with this. I want all of you to ask yourselves right now, what did you hope to accomplish coming here today? What have you taken away from today? And how can you use these stories to propel justice in your everyday lives? Our goal today was to humanize Black voices. That should be each and every one of our goals every day until it is fully achieved. Thank you.
You can end it.